What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Comic Breakdown. If you guys are new to the channel, do me a favor and hit that sub button, hit that notification bell, make sure you're not missing any of the awesome content that we have coming out. And I am super excited about this line. This issue was tremendously better than I thought it was going to be. With this video, we're jumping into Punisher, issue number 1. We had the prelude in Daredevil, Woman Without Fear. We saw the Punisher with his new symbol, his new logo, and he is working for the Hand, with this issue number 1 revealing exactly why that is happening. Because I know I was left wondering, why the heck would Punisher be working for this organization? What incentives, what could they possibly be offering him to make him do this kind of work and work with an organization he would otherwise more than likely try to take down? Coming from writer Jason Aaron, be sure to buy the comic, support the industry, and with that being said, let's dive into this breakdown. Alright gang, so as we dive into this issue number 1, we are picking up in the past. The day that changed everything for the Punisher. The day that Frank Castle, he lost his family. With the death of Maria. With him barely able to have any kind of breath. Whispering her name. Reaching out to her with little strength he has. This is the day that changed everything. This is the day that Frank Castle became something more. Ever since that day, he has become the king of killers. The ultimate assassin. And taking us to Greece. Picking up in present day, we see the individuals known as the Apostles of War, and they are currently on a heist. They are stealing anything that they can have of value. This stuff is going to help them wage their war. Mostly weaponry, stuff that is super high tech and is supposed to take out the best of the best in the Marvel universe. And so while they are stealing all of this stuff, they get word that at the front entrance, they are under attack. They are under attack by the Punisher, with everybody arming them with the high-tech weaponry that is here in this room. They all prepare for the Punisher, looking around, waiting for his arrival. This is when all of the lights, they go out. And in a matter of moments, without a single shot fired, every single one of the apostles, they are taken down, with one left standing to give Frank Castle any kind of answer. He wants to know who they are working for, who sent you here, and why are you stealing this? But the apostle, he refuses to give up any information, that he would much rather die at the hands of the Punisher, be tortured by him, than have to deal with his boss, saying that his boss would do 10 times more than the Punisher could ever deal out to him. In a matter of seconds, we see the Punisher move in on him, carrying his sword and cutting off the hands of the apostle, taking that sword and driving it through his chest. The Punisher not caring about getting the answers because he will find them eventually. The Punisher giving the order to take all the weapons, destroy everything, and burn this place down. We see the ninjas coming out of everywhere. These are the Hand. The new organization the Punisher is more or less leading at this point. Now the Hand, it was born to take down the worst of the worst. They murder so that they can stop the bad guys, or at least that is the relative motto of the Hand. And so with this mission complete, they head back to the hidden location of the Hand, their hidden fortress, a place that can only be located if you have ever been here. Now the Hand, over the centuries, while they definitely take out it's what they call unholy, at the end of the day, they're glorified assassins. They are the world's finest assassins, and they will work for just about anybody. And so while morally and ethically they think they are doing the right thing by cleansing the world through murder, through chaos, through violence, the truth is they're just a cult of psychopathic ninjas, and they do all of this to honor the Beast, one murder at a time. But with Punisher returning back to the fortress, he is met by the High Priestess, with Frank Castle being welcomed back as the High Slayer, letting the Archpriestess know exactly what transpired today, not knowing who the Apostles of War are, not knowing who they are working for, saying that the Hand needs to keep an eye out, look for all shipments by these guys, and we might be able to pin pinpoint who is responsible and who is backing all of this. The High Priestess, she lets Frank Castle know that they are ready. They have the day's catches ready to be executed. Murderers who went free, rapists, abusers of children, the worst of the worst from all around the world. The Hand has gathered them all together, brought them here to the fortress, just so the High Slayer can take them out. And the Punisher, he executes every single one of them with his own hand. Though he is offered every single day to have his disciples, to have the ninjas execute these guys, he refuses to let them do it. His determination, his dedication to the white-hot focus of his rage. And ever since he started working with the Hand, he has begun to use swords and knives, training in the ninja ways, becoming a more efficient and proficient killer. Frank Castle really is still adjusting to this role, because it has only been a couple of weeks since he has done this, since he has joined the Hand. But it's not the killing, not the murdering that he has to get used to, because for years now, the Punisher has been the world's most accomplished mass murderer. He is the king of killers. The Archpriestess, the only thing she has done is brought the crown. With the Hand invading him weeks ago, the Archpriestess let him know that he has the potential to be the one. But first, he must stand trial. With him ambushed, completely surrounded by ninjas, he pulls out his guns, and this fight is underway. And this is all a test to see if he can be the next fist of the beast. And while all of the ninjas, they descend upon him, we are taken back to the current time. He executes all of these prisoners, and in their execution, he lets them know that the Hand needs to bring more tomorrow. Headed off to his chambers, we see that his room, it is still packed with all kinds of firearms, and we see his old armor. It is sitting up on the mantle. The old Punisher symbol, the old logo, it's sitting right there. And so while he's wearing something new, while he has this new armor, while he is the fist of the beast, it is inevitable that he is going to be picking up that skull and putting it back on sometime in the future. Being the king of killers, taking us back to when he was ambushed, the Archpriestess, she watched in awe. She watched as the king of killers laid waste to every single one of her ninjas, the ones that she had trained since birth. Ninjas that she would consider her own children are massacred in droves. She watched as Frank Castle destroyed all of them. And though he's taken his cuts, he's taking his slashes, he's taking his stabs, there is nothing that is stopping him. Having his room booby-trapped, he is using claymore mines, he's blowing these guys up, he is just wreaking havoc. But all these ninjas, they died without a single cry, not a whimper, not a single sound. They died like ninja. The Archpriestess, watching all of this happen, she can't help but see the beauty in the Punisher. And once every single one of these ninjas had been dispatched, the Archpriestess comes in, and on a tray we have 3 knives. Asking if any of these knives look familiar to him, Frank Castle doesn't give a crap. Asking who the heck sent her, why they have come, and why they have tried to kill her. The Archpriestess, she has a trick up her sleeve, apologizing for the intrusion, saying that a test was required, that they're not here as assassins, but they are here as saviors. And they come with an offer, a chance to fulfill his true destiny. Not only that, they have brought him a gift. And this gift is exactly why Frank Castle has joined the Hand, picking up in present day inside his chambers. There is a woman laying in his bed as he takes off all of his equipment, as he takes off all of his gear, and she turns over, revealing her face. This is Maria, the love of his life, the wife that he thought long dead. Somehow she is back. The Hand has her right here in front of him. This is the gift that they offer, a gift that Frank Castle, he would never refuse. And because of this gift, that is why he is with the Hand, and he is the new fist of the beast. Alright gang, so as we dive into issue number 2, we are picking up with 12-year-old Frank Castle. Even all the way back then, while it may not have been predicted yet at the time, his path to the Punisher, it was an inevitable way. From bringing home dead roadkill, having gun magazines hidden, all of the fights, the bullying, so on and so forth. If you were to profile this kid today, you might think that he is going to end up being a mass shooter, even being 12 years old. The road he was destined to walk was already being paved. Jumping us over to present day. Frank Castle and his wife, they are sitting here having a conversation. By all appearances, his wife doesn't seem like she is at 100% just yet. The priestess has been giving her some kind of medicine to help her out. And even though they get this time together, Frank Castle is the High Slayer, which means he has some work to do. We see Frank Castle, he suits up in his new armor. Grabbing his sword, he heads out. He is continuing his training on. And while Frank Castle is here training, Frank Castle is being told how he was once witnessed being the most glorious killer there had ever been. But his training with this sword, this is not that. He is very clumsy. He's undisciplined, and she doesn't think a sword is a good option for him, especially when they have an entire arsenal of weapons. As she looks around at all of the warriors, one by one, she tells them to let me know when you started doing all of this, when the hand brought you in. And what we learn is that a lot of these people, they were 8, 9, 10 years old when they were taken or sold to the hand, letting Frank Castle know that his training, it began when he was a child, even if he doesn't realize it. But he was never training to be a ninja. And that is also not why he was brought here. He was brought here because he is what they all aspire to be. He is nature's perfect killing machine, believing him to be the finest murderer the world has ever had, letting him know that their founders, the sickly ones, they were there for the dawn of man killing man. The hand had been formed and they did their bidding, one murder at a time. And from the beast, they derived their true power. And because the hand has strayed so far from this, that is why Frank Castle is here. They have been directionless, defeated time and time and time again, believing that they haven't had the proper paragon, the living symbol of their dark lord, the beast made flesh. As Frank Castle completes his training for the day, he completely whoops these guys. We can see the absolute devastation and brute force that he uses over his enemies, shattering both of their swords and headbutting this guy until he's knocked out cold. As we continue on with our little history lesson, we learn that they have been looking for someone like Frank Castle for a long time. And while our archpriestess, she goes off on her whole sermon, Frank Castle, he's more than willing to hear this out, but he is also letting it be known that we need to make sure everybody kills exactly who I say to kill. If they derail from this even in the slightest, Frank Castle is going to leave the hand. He also lets it be known that we are no longer training children here. He may be the finest murderer in the world, but the truth of the matter is he has a little bit of morality. He has humanity left inside of him. And if he's going to be working for an organization like the Hand, he's going to try to steer that moral compass in a better direction, and one that he can be more aligned with. When it comes to the archpriestess, she's been following Frank Castle for a very long time, ever since those days when he was 12 years old. And even back then, she knew of the promise that she saw inside of Frank Castle. But finally, getting down to business, sitting on his throne, we have one of the disciples from the Lord of War, bringing before him what is known as a banner cannon, being named like this because it hits like the freaking Hulk. He is one of the apostles of war. They are black market gun runners, suppliers, terrorists, so on and so forth. These just so happen to be the same apostles that he has been hunting down and murdering everywhere. This apostle, he is bringing this gun in hopes that they can have some kind of peace, because the Lord of War has no wish of going to war with the Punisher or the Hand, as Frank Castle begins demanding to know who he serves. The apostle letting it be known that you know who my leader is. You know whom I serve because you have prayed to him every single time that you have prayed for war. As the Punisher's eyes begin to turn red, he can see all of the suffering that has come at the hands of the apostles and their master. This isn't the only gift this apostle has brought. Going and reaching into his very own stomach, pulling out the stitches, he is able to pull a gun from inside of his guts, saying that he brings the gift of death He goes to kill Frank Castle, only for the bullets to ricochet off of his armor. And we see Frank Castle, he takes ninja stars like freaking Wolverine into his fist, and he punches them into the Apostle's face. Frank Castle, seeing that inside of his body there is a bomb, telling the others to disarm this before you kill him. The redness in his eyes, this is what is known as the eyes of the beast. This is one of 5 gifts that will be bestowed upon the High Slayer, asking him yet again, much like when he was a child, 3 daggers placed before him. As a child, he had wanted to take it, but he hesitated. But this time, he picked the dagger, and he picked the correct dagger. The dagger that belonged to the last known fist of the hand. This solidifies him as the High Slayer, as the fist of the beast. There is no doubt about it whatsoever to the Archpriestess. She is fully committed to Frank Castle being their guy. And now it is time for him to go and meet his father, taking him down to a very isolated and hidden place inside of this temple. This is where we see the beast himself, the Archpriestess, telling Frank Castle to bow before your god. Taking us elsewhere, this is where we have the Apostles of War. They are trying to currently make a deal with some local gangs, so on and so forth. The Apostles of War, all they want to do is cause war. And so when these rival gangs or terrorist organizations decide that they're gonna work out their differences, that they're not actually gonna be using war and violence, using guns to kill one another, the Apostles of War, they don't like hearing this. More specifically, their Lord doesn't like hearing this. And so because of their decision not to make war, the Apostles lay waste to all of them. After the Lord of War has made very quick work of these guys, he gets word, the Apostle that they had sent to the hand, the tracker went silent, and so they are assuming that Frank Castle has to be dead. But the Lord of War knows this not to be the case, because his uncle's realm would be roaring in welcome. With everything being silent, the Lord of War, he knows that Frank Castle has turned down his assistance. And that only means one thing: Aries, the Lord of War, the God of War. Alright gang, so as we dive into issue number 3, we are picking up with the Punisher leading his ninjas into war, charging full speed ahead. Right now they are taking on a whole battalion of Hydra. This is a bloody, deadly, and very brutal fight. These Hydra guys, they stood absolutely no chance. As Frank Castle and the ninjas, they take out all of these guys. They leave one of them alive. They bring him back to the Citadel. This Hydra agent, he is going to be tortured. The hand of Frank Castle will be the one that does it. The High Priestess letting him know that they all need a lesson from the High Slayer, from the King of Killers. And Frank Castle, he's not one of many words. He lets it be known that your job is to win the war, whatever it takes, whatever the cost. But the High Priestess, she's looking for something a little more, something a little different, something that will inspire everybody else. What she wants is the story of when Frank Castle killed his first person. This is a story that takes us back all the way to 10 years old. Frank Castle sitting on his rooftop just enjoying the day, and that's when he hears the noise. Looking over the edge, what he sees is one individual beating a man and a woman. What he also sees is everybody, they run. They scatter like rats. Windows are closing. Everyone pretends that they are not seeing what is happening. Hearing that woman scream, hearing her beg for help, Frank Castle picks up what appears to be his little BB gun and he points it at the man. But instead of pulling that trigger, he hesitates. He doesn't stop this from happening. And for weeks after that, he could hear the screams everywhere he went, believing that there was only one way to silence that justice for those individuals was the only way to stop the screaming. Finally, he gets to the point where he is going to devise a plan. He draws out his revenge plan. Step by step, he starts creating his weapon because he knows who is responsible. He has been following him for quite some time, knowing knowing exactly where he lives. Frank Castle, he creates some homemade napalm, setting up a booby trap. As soon as this guy walks out of his door, the napalm dumps onto him. As young Frank Castle walks out of the shadows, on his face is a Captain America mask, saying that he doesn't want to hear their screams anymore. What he wants to hear is this man's screams. Taking a spray can and a lighter, he sets him ablaze. As the man on fire runs out of the building and down into the street. As per usual, everybody scatters. The windows bang shut. Everyone pretends like they didn't see anything. And that was the day the Punisher was born. At this point, the Punisher has already finished up doing his interrogation of this Hydra agent. He knows who the leader of the apostles are. He knows that the god of war, the one known as Aries, is calling him out, knowing exactly where to find him. Frank Castle assembles all ninjas to the helicopters. Before they send the High Slayer into battle, there is one thing he needs to take care of. Because right now there is a dispute between two of the ninjas, both of them willingly admitting that they had killed another ninja in this dispute. Frank Castle's response to this is to kill both of them right there on the spot. When the High Priestess asks the question of why kill both of them, the Punisher's response is that they murdered somebody, both of them admitting this. And the Punisher, being High Slayer, he is the one to tell people when they can and cannot kill, that they will do what he says when he says to do it. If you are to disobey these rules, the Punisher himself will strike you down. As they are interrupted, something is going on with Maria. As they rush outside to see what is going on, she is freaking out, saying that they shouldn't be here. Their kids are waiting for them to be picked up. Of course, she doesn't know everything that has happened. Giving her a sedative, they put her down to sleep. But obviously, not having their children with them, it is affecting Maria very much. While a Punisher was handling this entire situation, they had still sent the ninjas ahead to face the God of War. And Aries sees this as an insult, believing the Punisher himself, the High Slayer, was going to come and confront him. Instead, they send unworthy ninjas to try and face a freaking God of War. Nonetheless, Aries, he murders everybody, leaving nothing to be resurrected. This massacre was a message. He's not looking for foot soldiers. He wants the Punisher. The Punisher right now, though, he is having a discussion with the Beast. The High Priestess telling the Punisher to let the Beast know how much you miss your children. Alright gang, so we are picking up really all over the United States. From Ohio to Los Angeles to New York, we are seeing one by one hideouts being taken down. And that is because they are hunting down Hatemonger. And though they have really done a number on a lot of these hideouts, the truth is, Hatemonger is fighting back. This is obviously something that the Punisher is not opposed to. The more Hatemonger fights, the more Punisher kills all of his men. Every time they find themselves at a new hideout, it seems that Finfrats, he has already made his escape, having no remorse for any of the mercenaries or any of the men that stay behind defending his places. Every time they find a cache, they burn all of the money and they take all of the weapons. If there is anybody left alive, the Punisher sees to their torture himself. Sees to their interrogation. One of them being alive is Warner Mayer, one of Hatemonger's media puppets. Hatemonger pays this guy a fortune, at one time calling himself the voice of freedom. But today, he is not going anywhere. Today, he is in the grasp of the Punisher. Now, the Punisher, he knows that Hatemonger is not here. What he wanted to do was put the fear of God into him. That way, he would call him, as he calls Hatemonger. Hatemonger, he has a lot of back channels, so it takes a couple of hours for him to get the message. With Hatemonger recognizing that the Punisher left him alive, that is not what the Punisher does. He kills everybody. And so if this man was left alive, it was for a purpose. It was so the Punisher could find the hideout of Hatemonger. Recognizing that he has found them, he tells his captain to prepare for battle. At this location, this is where the real war will be waged. If he destroys this place, Hatemonger will have nothing left. He goes on to tell the captain about this one time where he did meet the Punisher in a village in a forest a very long time ago. And that's what takes us 10 years back. We have the Punisher walking up to this village, and there is nothing but bodies. Coming up to an old woman, she asks if he is here to help. He says yes, but he is already too late. He is far too late to help any of these people. As she continues to dig this grave, the Punisher goes to find who might be responsible. And that's what takes us to Alaska in present day. Outside Hatemonger's facility, what we see is a fence going all the way around. Members of the Hand on this fence being eaten by polar bears. And inside that fence, it looks like a bunch of civilians that are unarmed. And then there is a red marker surrounding the property, not really sure what this is. Some kind of theatrics, some kind of message. But Punisher, he tells his men, let's go. As they all go to move in, as soon as they cross that red line, a sniper in the bell tower starts shooting. But this sniper, it is not targeting the Hand or the Punisher. It is targeting all of the civilians. With Frank Castle telling everyone to back up, he realizes that he missed something, taking us back to the past. He remembers how that old lady, she told him he was too late, and he very much was. But he is not here to end their war. He is here to end the man who profits from it. One by one, he starts taking out all of the guards surrounding this barn. It doesn't take long for him to dispatch them, asking where the other men are. One man points in a direction saying that the men are down there. Little did the Punisher know at this time, that man giving him directions was Hatemonger himself. Taking us back into present day, we have Frank Castle in the Hand. They are grabbing their weaponry, from grenade launchers to rocket launchers. They launch everything they have directly at that bell tower, taking it out of the air. It collapses down to the ground. All of the civilians, they run in opposite directions. And this is when the Hand moves in. As the Punisher cuts his way through all of these forces, members of the Hand are falling left and right. Hatemonger's captain is letting him know that it is getting messy up here. They have taken out communications and the generator. Not really sure if there is any opportunity for them to survive this conflict. Hatemonger lets it be known that there will be no surrender. Frank Castle does not take prisoners. So you are either going to die here or you are going to win this battle. As he makes his way through all of these forces, this is where he sees some of their members. They start to put on gas masks. As they release this kind of nerve agent, we see members of the Hand falling left and right, with the Punisher holding his breath. He goes running in, only for the captain of Hatemonger to gunbutt him in the stomach, and with this, he inhales deeply. Even with everything burning, everything feeling like it is on fire, he is still able to take his sword and thrust it right through her chest. As he takes her gas mask and he heads inside to Hatemonger's facility, it doesn't take long for him to come face to face with him. And while Hatemonger, he's sitting here trying to play nonchalant, like, I know I'm gonna die, at least you could give me a gentleman's death. That it was a fun battle, it was a fun war, it was a good chess match. The truth is, the Punisher, he is not here to hear any of it, making him bleed real good. He takes Hatemonger and he throws him to the polar bears. And when one of the Hand asks what is next from the High Slayer, he says that we continue our battle. We have been shown more or less some origins of Frank Castle, where he has come from, and how he became the Punisher we know today, where this violence really originated from. The Priestess of the Hand, the one that had recruited Frank Castle to begin with. She has been trying to unlock this secret, believing that if she is able to figure out how all of this came to be, how he became such an efficient killer, then maybe her ninjas would be half as good as him, and that means total domination over their enemies. And the priestess, she is dug down all the way back to his past, back to when he was a child going to school, causing all kinds of trouble, all the way down to the first person that he ever killed. By all accounts, she truly does believe that he is the High Slayer, that he is meant to be the fist of the beast. Right now, our High Slayer, aka the Punisher, he is laying down some punishment on criminals. Some that have exploited underage children, others trying to do ethnic cleansing of entire races, rape, murder, all of these things. Because of this, the High Slayer is beheading guys left and right. This is part of his daily ritual, but today they have a little bit less than usual, usually having a lot more people for the High Slayer to kill. The Archpriestess has a lot more ninjas surrounding the Citadel. That is because of the Apostles of War, because of Aries. They want to ensure that if there is some kind of assault on their facility, that they are going to be protected. Believing that the day might be done, we have the Archpriestess who comes into the room, saying that she has a handful of ninjas that are offering themselves up as sacrifice. This is because of the shame that they put on the hand. These ninjas are the survivors of the last confrontation with Ares, god of war. He had left them alive as a living insult to the hand. But not only that, Ares made them pray to the god of war. They dropped down to their knees and they prayed. Now for the priestess, this is the biggest insult that you could do to the hand. The biggest insult that you could give the beast. Frank Castle, on the other hand, he could care less on who people pray to. He is not going to let these individuals be murdered by his hand because they prayed to the wrong god. She takes this as a sign that they should just kill themselves. About ready to give the order for them to slice their bellies open, Frank Castle lets them know that this needs to stop. Right now, they need all of the men that they have. Not only that, they're gonna need every single thing at their disposal. The priest is trying to let the Punisher know that he needs warriors that are worthy of his name, true disciples of the beast, just like the High Slayer. He needs masters in the way of the Punisher. This is when she asks, how can we do this? Tell us the secret on what makes you such an efficient and effective killer. But the Punisher, he does believe that they are fine exactly how they are, vowing that he will be with them the next time they go against Ares. And so for at least this day, these warriors have been spared. Taking us over to the garden, this is where we have Maria, the wife to Frank Castle, resurrected by the hand. The only problem, she knows that something is missing. She knows that they do not belong here, not sure where their children are. This is nothing more than a hollow shell of what Maria used to be. And Frank Castle, he knows this. He knows that she is more or less ill, that she is not herself. But every single second that he gets with her by her side, he is going to take it. Showing us the previous night, as the Punisher had walked through the garden, he finds himself met by Lord Deathstrike and Lady Bullseye. These two assassins, they have come for the Punisher, saying that he does not deserve to be the fist of the beast, that he is unworthy, and they are going to prove once and for all that that is in fact true. As the three of them begin to battle, we pick up with the priestess, currently praying to the beast. Right now, she is concerned that the Punisher is losing his path, giving him exactly what he needed to come and join their side. In doing this, she has inadvertently let Frank Castle know what it means to be afraid. Having Maria back has changed everything because he is afraid to lose her. He is afraid of what she might see him become. And you also have Aries, who is knocking on the front door. Maybe a young god in comparison to the beast, he is still a very furious and dangerous god to go up against. And so while she does her prayers, we pick up in Madripoor. And as they stand in the destruction of a recent gang war, the Apostles of War have been supplying weapons to small gangs all over the world, giving them weapons far beyond their capability. This has led to death, destruction, and mayhem. Ares letting us know that his true nature, it is to help humanity sharpen their stones. to understand how to truly do war. He is unable to go against his very nature, no matter how hard he has tried. From being a father, being an Avenger, he has tried so many things, but this is who he is. But he knows that there is something off with the Punisher, because the Punisher sending ninjas with swords after the god of war. He knows that this is not Frank Castle. He knows that there is something off about him. Something has changed in him. That once bloodlust thirst that Frank Castle had, it is somehow dissipated. This is where he brings his spirit form to the priestess. If anybody is going to have the answers that he wants, it is going to be her. Obviously, she is not happy about him being able to just transport himself into this temple, this holy place of the beast. But Aries is letting her know that the beast, he's not going to reply. The truth is, many of the gods stopped answering prayers eons ago. He is coming to let her know that somebody on the other side is at least hearing her, not being intimidated by this statue of the beast. In fact, he makes fun of him, saying that he is nothing but a fat monster that doesn't even look like he could scratch his own behind. But really, he has come to have a conversation about how she has been busy desecrating his holiest of pantheons, the great cathedral of combat savagery known as the Punisher. The priestess believing that he fears him. More than anything, Aries is disgusted with him, disgusted of what they have turned him into, as he sits here behind his walls, hiding with ninjas at the guard. Because the Punisher, he knew it wouldn't matter if he had a sword, a gun, a screwdriver. If he wants your blood, the Punisher is going to come for you. That these people here, they don't understand Frank Castle. That they are tampering with perfection. That whatever you are doing, you need to stop. Stop forcing Frank Castle to betray his true self. Adding a thread onto this, saying that the next time you see me, if Frank Castle has not been freed from your grasp, it will be the end of the hand. The priestess, of course, objecting and saying that Frank Castle is finally becoming the individual that he needs to be, that he was always destined to be. And that is the fist of the beast. That for the first time in his life, he is embracing his true self. On the outside, Frank Castle getting his butt handed to him. Lady Bullseye and Lord Deathstrike are just whooping him. Cause while he may be pretty efficient when it comes to swordsmanship, he is not as good as them. He is much better when he has a pistol in his hand and he can blow some stuff up. Aries wanting to know, how did you do it? How could you possibly convince the Punisher to serve as the warlord of the hand? Because the Punisher that he knows would have easily put a bullet right between her eyes. As the Punisher continues on his duel, we see Maria step out of her room. In doing so, this enrages the Punisher, knowing that her life is in jeopardy, that there could be some chance she could be collateral damage. We see that beast within sight of him. It starts to rise up. His eyes and his fists begin to glow red, throwing this dagger and killing Lord Deathstrike. Lady Bullseye immediately drops down to the ground, praying on her knees, recognizing him to be the true hand, the true fist of the hand. Now Aries knows that these assassins were sent by the priestess, letting her know that whatever you are trying to turn him into, it's not going to happen. The truth is, Aries would rather kill him and give him a place of honor in Hades. Still sticking to the story that Frank Castle was given nothing to join them, we see Aries disappear. Before he goes, the priestess does let him know that the Punisher will be coming for him, and eventually, here soon, there is going to be a new god of war. Picking up, walking around in the garden, we have Maria and Frank Castle. Now, Maria at this point, she is still very confused. She knows that she does not belong here. There are so many missing pieces for her. Wanting to get out of here, just go anywhere. She wants to go to a hockey game. A hockey game being a very important moment for both of their lives, because that is where they met For the very first time, Frank Castle out there on the ice, smashing dudes against the glass. This is the first time that their eyes ever met one another. But the Punisher having to get back to work, he lets her know that he will return soon. Letting her get some rest, he heads off and they prepare for their battle against the God of War. The priestess letting him know that he is going to be going to war with a special cadre of ninjas by his side. All of them now bearing his symbol. The shamed ninjas from before, the cursed survivors. They have been reborn. And this is because they have learned of the greatest lesson in the way of the Punisher. The priestess has finally understood everything that he has been trying to teach them, or at least to her understanding. None of these ninjas could walk the same path until they had seen the world through his eyes. Until they had seen everything they ever loved struck down right in front of them. The priestess made these ninjas watch as she slaughtered their entire family, believing that now they have become true children of the beast. Asking what is their next task, we see the Punisher, he pulls out his sword, and moments later we are picking up in Maria's room with Frank Castle waking her up. He is drenched in blood, and he is letting her know that it is time to go. To issue number 5, we have Frank Castle waking up Maria, quickly grabbing her, grabbing some guns and some weapons, and he heads out, ready to get out of this place, be done with the hand altogether. Because moments ago, he pulled out his sword and he laid down the priestess, chopping right through her. We see her transform, taking some kind of monstrous form, more than likely some kind of power bestowed by the beast. But even taking this form, she is no match for the Punisher. He cuts this monster down right where it stands, thinking that he might have to fight his way out of here. Not a single ninja raises their blade to him. They simply bow and say, "God bless the beast." And so as he grabs his wife and he makes his escape, they leave the compound walls, the two of them making their way through the woods. Maria starts to feel very ill. She becomes very weak, not really sure what's going on. We see Frank Castle begin to carry her, trying to get as far away as he can possibly go. That's when we're thrown back to the past. A teenage Frank Castle, causing nothing but trouble, getting ready to be expelled from school. While he is sitting in the bathroom one day, this is when some jocks come in and they start to tease this guy, giving him swirlies, really just messing with him, picking on him, teasing on him, bullying him. And Frank Castle beats the crap out of every single one of them. This is when him and Stedman became friends. Stedman letting him know that Frank Castle, he has a lot of pent-up aggression. Eventually, it's going to be taken out in the wrong spot. Stedman, he recommends joining a sport, one where his aggression, it might be truly appreciated. That, of course, is hockey. And man, did he thrive. Not necessarily as a hockey player, but he was one to definitely throw down any opportunity that he got. And through hockey, that is how he met Maria. Instantaneously, the two were drawn to each other. After this first game, she came to many more. Frank Castle was always too shy to go say anything to her. That's when Stedman, he really stepped in, giving her a letter saying that these sweet words, they are all from Frank Castle. Words that he simply can't say because he is too shy. And so Maria, believing that these words are from Frank Castle, this is what kicked off their relationship. The lies of Stedman led to the greatest thing in his entire life. But for Stedman himself, this would very much lead to his demise. Because with Frank Castle being so preoccupied with Maria, Stedman was pushed off to the side. They stopped hanging out as much. Stedman started getting picked on even more. Kids from school that used to bully him, they offered to take him out, to have one good time, one good night. But that night, they went out drinking. The autopsy reports that Stedman had never been drinking. But everybody knew those guys that bullied him, they were drinking and driving. They survived, but Stedman did not. They left him there. He clinged on to life for 4 hours before he finally passed away. This is when Frank Castle knew that he could have saved him. He could have been there for him, but he is too distracted with love. A few days later, we have Frank Castle making a phone call from a payphone, calling Maria to really check in, because what he did is he found those bullies and he beat all of them to death. Not only that, he recognized that Maria was going to be a distraction from truly being able to live up to his potential. This is when he tells her that he joined the Marines. And this is when she tells him that she is pregnant. Taking us back to present day, we have the Punisher returning to the compound. That is because Maria has been slowly fading away. Returning here, this is where we see the priestess somehow returned from the dead. She sits here with a smug smile on her face, knowing the Punisher would return, because Maria's resurrection treatment, she says it's not complete. And so if she gets too far from the compound, she will die. This forces Frank Castle's hand. It forces him to return back to the Fist of the Beast. Definitely not being happy about this, he lets the priestess know that when all of this is done, he will ensure that he kills her and she stays dead. But Frank Castle, wasting no time, he hands Maria off and he lets them know that he is going to face Aries, the god of war, by himself. While the priestess tries to say something, she is still a servant to the Fist of the Beast. The only thing he lets her know is that if Maria is dead when he comes back, he will burn this place to the ground. And so while he takes off in his helicopter, Maria is brought into the room where they make their prayer. Not really sure what is going on here. Not really even sure if this is actually Maria. There is definitely funny business going on. This is only going to last so long. They have Frank Castle holding on to this sliver of hope, but deep down inside, he knows this is not his Maria. That's what takes us outside the compound of Aries. The Punisher's helicopter being shot down out of the sky. The acolytes of war, believing that maybe they took down the Punisher, but one by one, they start getting diced up, with Frank Castle using their own weapons against them. He breaks into this compound, and inside, Aries, the god of war, is waiting for him, letting Frank Castle know that he is lost. But through the power of war and the grace of Aries, he vows that the Punisher will be redeemed. She was 8 months pregnant, with Frank Castle preparing to ship off to war. Maria had waited at the train station, waited to see off her beloved. The thing is, Frank Castle was already gone, unable to say his goodbyes. His pregnant wife, she sat there at that train station alone, and Frank Castle was at war. And that is what's going to take us to present day. Frank Castle currently facing off Aries, using one of the banner cannons, a gamma-powered minigun. He is trying to use all the weapons that Aries has been throwing into circulation. Using everything at his disposal, Frank Castle is trying to take down the god of war, but he is left wanting. Aries right now, he is livid, more mad than he has ever been, believing that Frank Castle has turned into a travesty, nothing more than a sliver, a shadow of the man he once was, telling Frank Castle to show me your war face. Show me the greatest machine warfare has ever born. Show me the true Punisher, using a graviton bazooka, which essentially grabs everything within the vicinity and it launches it at Aries. And while Aries taunts him, letting him know that he was baptized in the blood of war, and by war, he will be redeemed, letting Frank know that he was the purest of all his disciples. Knowingly or not, he has always been a pantheon of Aries. And so he has to know, what did the priestess offer you? What have they given you that makes you turn away from who you are? Makes you turn away from the god of war, from being the Punisher? As Frank Castle attempts to use his sword, ninja stars, all of this stuff, Aries lets him know that you are beginning to disgust me. What you are, what you have become. This shell of the Punisher. This is not the man that I imbued with power. This is not the one that I made the slaughterer of men. That you have become nothing more than a pathetic puppet. With Frank Castle just taking one heck of a beating. Aries is not the god of mercy. He is the god of war. And he is going to make Frank suffer. Suffer for all of his sins. Hiding away like a frightened child in his castle. Surrounded by idolizers and false prophets. Saying that he is no messiah. Whatever lies they tell you. Aries lets him know that he belongs to the god of war. That it was war that made him into the man he is today. Frank Castle bleeding, bruised, and his face swelling up like a freaking grapefruit. He lets Aries know that it wasn't war that made him the man he was. And it sure as hell was not the god of war. As Aries drags his limp and bleeding body, he tries to figure out why it took so long for Frank Castle to come and have this confrontation. Why did he hide away? Because the Punisher, he never hides. The Punisher is relentless, day and night. There is no border. There is no sleep. Hiding behind his walls, behind the ninjas, clinging to the shadows, almost as if he is protecting something. And this is when Aries figures it out. That is how they got the Punisher to side with them. Aries knows that his family has been resurrected. They gave back what war had taken, the sacrifice that his war demanded. They committed the greatest blasphemy of all, telling his apostles to go to the Hand Citadel, find Frank Castle's family, and bring them to him, because the God of War plans to reclaim the Punisher. By doing so, this will mean the death of Frank Castle's family, that their deaths will free the Punisher. This is where we see the Beast arrive inside of Frank Castle, the red flames growing all around him, burning the nearby apostles. Aries tries to figure out what kind of profane magic this is, telling Frank to look at himself. Look at what you have become. But for Frank Castle, he will do whatever it takes to win the war, to end the god of war. Using the Hellfire and the Dead Man's Dagger, he goes in on Aries, only for Aries to backhand him and send Frank Castle flying. But what Aries did not recognize is that dagger, it landed in his stomach. Frank Castle taking full opportunity. He gets up and he drives that dagger as far into Aries as he possibly can. As he goes in to give the killing blow, Aries lets him know that you were like a son to me. Breaking that dagger in the hand of Frank Castle, he lets him know that this will be the day the Son of God falls, taking his head and smashing it into the ground repeatedly. This is the death of Frank Castle. And while he drifts between the living and dead, he has a memory from back in the war, back in the day when everyone was discussing when they got their first kill. Now Frank Castle, he wasn't preoccupied with the conversation. He was focused on a picture. This picture of was his baby girl, his firstborn child. This is what made Frank Castle the man he is today. That little girl, that small child was the only thing that drove him, that made him be the killer he is. He knew it was him or them, and he would do anything to get home to his child. He wasn't baptized in war. It wasn't Aries that made him the man he is. It was having that loved one back home, the one he would protect over anything else. And it didn't matter what stood in his way. It didn't matter how many forces were against him. Nothing would stop him from getting home. This is when the Punisher awakens to find himself at the Hand Citadel, returning back from the land of the dead. Frank Castle has been resurrected. The ninjas of the Hand, they found him on the brink of death. They healed up his body, tried to make him as 100% as possible. And while his body still has much healing to do, he is also informed that Aries and his apostles, they never made their way to the castle, which means Maria and the children, they are safe. Now, we have yet to see Frank Castle's children actually resurrected, and we are about to learn why. asking if it worked this time. She lets it be known that it did not. The priestess letting us know that resurrecting children, it is one of the hardest things to do, especially ones that have been dead for so long. Is what we see is their resurrection has turned them into monstrosities, having multiple arms, at least 10 fingers on one hand, more than 2 eyes. These things are abominations, because every time they try to resurrect the children, it leaves them with less physical material than before. Even the magical elixirs blessed by the beast, this simply isn't enough. Even it has its limitations. To further, all the injections that his wife is having to take to ensure she doesn't turn into some kind of abomination. These are all taking its toll, which means it simply might not be possible for Frank Castle's children to be resurrected. Obviously, he recognizes what needs to be done here, telling everybody to leave the room. He grabs the sword from his hip because he knows these abominations, they need to be put out of their misery. They need to be killed, and they have to start again. And so, killing his children, Frank Castle goes out to the garden, finding himself throwing up, unable to stomach what he has to do. This is when they have a visitor. That visitor is, of course, Daredevil. He comes in asking Frank Castle, what in the God's name do you think you are doing? To this issue, we are picking up with a virtual meeting. The leaders of the criminal underworld, which in many ways means the world, they have come together to find a solution to a shared problem. That problem is Frank Castle. In a very unprecedented meeting, we have terrorists, we have mafia bosses, smugglers, mercenaries, gang leaders, even a corrupt government or two. And we have Miss January, the one who is probably going to make the most money out of this deal being struck. What she is proposing is that they stop these attacks from the Punisher, that all these organizations, they have to give her money. Many of them question, we have already thrown so much money at this problem. Obviously, money isn't stopping it. But Miss January, her plan is to throw money at everything. They are going to reward people for rumors, for tips, for photos. The better the intel, the bigger the reward. Anyone can contribute. Anyone can follow the hunt in real time on the dark web. Having the platform already ready and set up, it supports live streams, geotagging, fully automated location predictions, rewards issued through an anonymous cryptocurrency wallet, completely secure instant payments. They will make everybody, friend or foe, turn on the Punisher. They are going to use the world as their eyes. If everybody agrees, the total reward pool is just under $500 million. The one who kills the Punisher, they get whatever is left over once all is said and done. This is an absolute feeding frenzy. A first come, first serve. Everybody agrees. And so the search begins. In Madripoor, there was a sighting of Frank Castle 6 days ago. 4 days ago, he was seen in London. 28 hours ago, he was seen in Zagreb. Slowly but surely, the accounts are starting to come in. People are doing their best to bank off of all of this. By the 3rd day, they were fairly confident that he was somewhere in Eastern Europe. The question isn't so much where is Frank Castle, but rather who in this region warrants a visit from the Punisher, whose cruelty invites the king of killers to their doorsteps. In this region, there is only one person that Frank Castle might be looking for. As Frank Castle lands his helicopter, a young boy gets a sighting of the Punisher, taking a photo with his phone, being uploaded instantly. Miss January and her organization, they have a second update on exactly where Frank Castle is. The boy being rewarded $500,000. They notify every single bounty hunter and let them know happy hunting. Now this is where we pick up with the Punisher's more or less war journal. Some inner dialogue on exactly why he is out here in the open. He is here for the Brodsky brothers. They took over the family business. They decided to end the decade-long feud with local law enforcement once and for all. Up to that point, it had been a very expensive and bloody affair. Bribes, arrests, the whole 9 yards. With the brothers not willing to uphold everything that their father had brokered for for them when the old man died, leaving the operation to his sons Freddy and Roar. The night before his funeral, they got to work. The next day, processions walking through the streets, grieving widows, grandchildren, the whole ballot, all while bodies of the uncooperative officers, they hung skin between the houses like drying laundry. As the Punisher makes his way through this market, people are slowly taking pictures of him, getting their rewards, giving updated time and location of where the Punisher is. People getting even more rewards if they are able to get pictures of what weapons he is carrying. Now, ever since these brothers took over control of the operation and annexed local farm and expanded their operation to something much bigger, the truth is, everybody knows exactly what the brothers are doing and nobody is doing anything to stop them. Now, as the Punisher sits here and he observes this local farm, this is when he recognizes that somebody is taking a picture of him, going to try and chase them down. That is when a young boy comes up behind the Punisher with a gun, drawing it on the Punisher. The boy is unable to take the shot, grabbing the gun before the kid is able to do anything more. His mother walking over and saying, "Pull the trigger." But before he can figure out what is going on with this situation, this is where we see four armed men come running down the alleyway, opening fire on the Punisher, trying to protect the boy. He recognizes how quickly this has gone by, with a live stream update of exactly what is going on. Miss January is keeping tabs on everything, and the Punisher is working with all his effort to try and stay alive. This is exactly what he expected from Brodsky's men, but moreover, there are drones, technology targeting systems that he did not expect, even having apostle weapons. With a sniper off in the distance, the Punisher is being very careful on where he steps and how he moves, running out of human shields to hide behind. He goes to find exactly where this sniper might be, acknowledging this as a very impressive setup, killing the sniper, picking up her tablet. This is where he sees it. He sees the bounty, the reward, the live stream. He sees all of it. Even still, one by one, there is nobody that can stop the Punisher as a helicopter begins to move in, coming in from all directions. It is looking like the Punisher finds himself completely surrounded. Rockets coming in, explosions left and right. He is doing his best to get inside this facility. All hell is broken loose. There are no more allies. It is every man for themselves. Hydra assassins, Hood's men, Black Op groups that you have never even heard of, the best trained killers in the world, have all come to take the life of the Punisher. And while they hunt the Punisher, all of our mercenaries also kill each other, all killing each other for that reward. This is where we see a sniper getting taken out, the one to put a bullet in her head. It is none other than Jigsaw, his freaking self, accepting the bounty. He is out here hunting with all the other mercenaries, but he has every intention of being the one to kill Frank Castle. With Punisher inside the building, these walls are bulletproof, which means the people are gonna have to come inside to find the Punisher. The Brodsky brothers, they spared no expense at fortifying this position. For the Punisher, this is going to work out fantastically. Having Freddy, one of the brothers currently tied up, they are hand taping his hands to a 50 cal machine gun, with the Punisher letting Freddy know that there isn't justice in this world for him. After all the life, innocence, and joy that he has killed in the world, there will never be enough justice. But he lets Freddy know that 4 men are about to come through those doors wearing body cams. They are going to come directly for you, believing that you are the Punisher. You are going to die helpless and live stream to the dark web. You see, the Punisher set all of this up, bringing all of his enemies to one location. Any that might think that they are going to take down the Punisher, that they might be able to kill Frank Castle, having the forces of the Hand behind him. Frank Castle intentionally sends out the code to the warehouse. Not only is he taking Miss January's money, but he is also setting all of them up. As the mercenaries enter the code, they breach the building, going in guns drawn. That is when Freddy opens up with the 50 cal, bullets being sprayed in all directions. This is an absolute bloodbath. Our mercenaries able to take out Freddy. This is when they recognize that this is not the Punisher, and from the shadows, our sword-wielding Frank Castle Castle. He comes out and he starts massacring. As all our mercenaries begin to pile in one by one, the hand descends upon them. Many more than Frank Castle had expected, but not enough for them to worry. Frank Castle, he also sent some assassins to go take care of Miss January, with her being murdered in front of all the other leaders. They are quickly learning that they are out of their element, preparing the bunker buster bomb that is about to blow this whole place to Kingdom Come. There is an explosion that goes off early. That explosion caused by Billy Russo. Billy was really believing that it would just be satisfying if he could just see Frank Castle die. But like everybody else, he felt the temptation. A lot of money on the table, and if he is being honest with himself, he wants to be the one to kill Frank Castle. To finally be the one that brings down the Punisher, with Jigsaw going on and gloating for just a little bit of time. This gives the Punisher time to take stock. A broken rib, superficial cuts. He knows exactly the state that he is currently in, noticing that there is something going on with Billy, something in his eyes, something that makes him seem like he is very much off, more than usual. He appears to be on something for strength, courage, or maybe even pain relief. Whatever this is, it is making Billy very unpredictable. As Jigsaw goes on his huge monologue, the Punisher is able to get a club with nails into the head of Billy, but Billy, not moving, not budging for a moment, he continues going at Frank Castle, with the hand still fighting off mercenaries, grenades going off in the distance. These explosions cause a small distraction, with the Punisher looking like he might just lose here. Jigsaw slamming the Punisher's face into the ground. This is when the Punisher gets the upper hand. He takes his sword and he drives it right through the chest of Jigsaw, taking that sword and driving it through the neck of Jigsaw. Just like that, Billy Russo is taken off the board. 5 seconds later, the entire building erupts in flames. There is no light, there is no peace, no light flashing before the Punisher's eyes, just darkness. With all the bodies being collected, to include Billy Russo, they are all brought back to the hand complex. The High Slayer, aka the Punisher, being taken to the temple for healing. All the others are being taken down into the cellar. Not sure how they might serve the Punisher. They are gonna put their dead bodies to use. Gang, so as we dive into this issue, we're gonna be jumping around time a little bit. We're gonna be taking place right after Frank Castle returns home from war, and we're also gonna be focusing on present day. Now, as we jump into the past when we first open up this comic, we are getting narration from Maria, and she has been having a very reoccurring dream, almost a nightmare. Opening up the door, what she sees is the devil, because with Frank Castle returning home, and every time she looks at him, she sees nothing but the devil himself. She is worried about the sins that Frank Castle has committed, the things that he has done in the name of his country. She is concerned about his salvation and his soul, telling all of this to the Catholic priest. She says to have him come in, bring in Frank Castle, have him come to confession, lay his sins out so that he can have a few Hail Marys and we can save his soul. She had prayed every single night that Frank Castle would be safe, that he would be strong, and now that he has come home, it is clear that he is stronger than ever. But at this point, Maria doesn't believe that God has anything to do with that. This is what takes us to the Citadel of the Hand, the confrontation we have all been waiting for. Daredevil has scaled the walls and he is here questioning the Punisher, trying to figure out what the heck he is doing. And Daredevil tries to let him know that you are being used. You may think that you are using the hand, but you are only being used for ruin and slaughter. Obviously, Frank Castle letting Daredevil know that he doesn't need his permission, just like every time before they have ever had any kind of conflict. Today is no different, but he does give Daredevil the opportunity to leave. But Daredevil has been sneaking around this Citadel for quite a while. He saw the ninjas bring him home. He saw Frank Castle on the verge of death. He knows the Archpriestess has been using her magic to bring him back. He has also seen his dead wife up in that building, asking what Maria would think about everything that is going on. Daredevil turns his back to the Punisher. He goes to tell Maria everything that is happening. That is where the Punisher stops him, grabs hold of him, and throws him across the field. As the flames start to come out of Frank Castle's eyes, he draws his sword out, letting Daredevil know that he is having a choice, that he can turn around, he can walk away all right now. But we know Daredevil, and there is no way that he is turning away from this. That is where the fight breaks out, with the devil of Hell's Kitchen going in full force, ready to lay down some hate. We cut back over to the past. Maria remembers asking Frank Castle when he returned home, was the war really as bad as the TV makes it out to be? But Frank Castle said nothing. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, almost as if he is lost in thought, what some would call the 1,000-yard stare. And then he rolls over and he pretends to be asleep, avoiding talking about the war even in the slightest bit. But she did understand the longing look in his eyes, the longing for a world that made sense to him, for a world that he could love even in all its turmoil. And as Maria would watch him with their children, she always kept an eye on him. Whenever he was around them, the children were almost terrified of him. The truth being, Frank Castle, he was more terrified of his own children. He was terrified of the family life, the monotony, no longer being in conflict, no longer at a war. It took about a month before he started setting up a tent in the backyard. This is where he would sleep most of his nights, holding that gun to his chest. He is always prepared, always ready for something to pop off. And every few weeks, there would be a new veteran at the door, almost as if they were holy disciples making their sacred pilgrimage. They would bring gifts, envelopes of cash, all which Frank Castle would refuse. They would tell Maria with tears in their eyes that they would be dead if not for Frank Castle, that he was their savior, he was their hero, that in the face of certain death, he stood triumphant. But Frank Castle didn't like her hearing these stories, acting as if it was almost an old fling, something that he doesn't want to talk about and he wants to erase from his memory. But Maria knew all the way back then that war was his one true love. And now returning home, he is mourning the loss of that love, while he sleeps alone away from his wife, and the children grow up with a stranger inside their house. And while Maria was away, needing a hysterectomy, she was in the hospital for a couple of days just to recover, which means Frank Castle had to be left alone with the children. Maria would be lying to herself if she wasn't concerned. When she came home, what she found was nobody in the home, but it was an absolute disaster. Food, toys, garbage, all over the place. And when she saw that the children's bed were empty, she had panicked. In this moment, she truly realized how scared and afraid she had become of the man she married, believing that she never really knew him at all. Going into his tent in the backyard, opening up, this is where she finds Frank and the children. This is the moment she saw what all the other veterans had seen. She saw Lieutenant Frank Castle, United States Marine Corps, the man who always kept his people safe. She realizes that she may not know who Frank Castle is, but that is because Frank Castle doesn't know who he is, not outside of war. But she does believe that given time, with the grace of God and having faith, that he may figure that out. With Frank Castle coming in that night, grabbing hold of Maria and holding her close. She could feel him trembling, trying to tell her a story about a boy on a rooftop when something horrible had happened. He tried, but he couldn't find the words. And so they just held each other until the sun came up. This is when she comes to the realization that Frank Castle didn't go overseas looking for a war. He had gone because he was running away from one. Throwing us back into present day, the battle between Frank Castle and Daredevil. And while Frank Castle, he has gotten relatively good with a sword, in comparison to Daredevil, he is sloppy, he is inconsistent, and he is no good whatsoever against the devil of Hell's Kitchen. With Daredevil trying to let him know that your eyes, right now, they are on fire. These are gifts of the beasts. He thought these to just be myth. At this point, this has gone way past playing a part in swinging a sword, that he has been truly infected by the power of the beast. Being able to outmaneuver the Punisher, he gets Frank Castle down on the ground with a knee on his neck, and he tries to let him know that he has been down this road before. The beast's evil once had possessed him. It had corrupted him, the same way it is doing to Frank Castle right now. But the Daredevil has a cure for this. After his possession, he had Dr. Strange teach him a spell, just in case the hand ever tried it again. begin. This is an exorcism spell. Putting the cross onto Frank Castle's forehead, he begins to chant the spell. He begins trying to siphon the evil that has gone inside of Frank Castle. As the rage builds up inside the Punisher, we are taken back to Maria. After that night, things had been much different for her family. The kids would go out to Frank Castle's tent. There would be times that you even hear Frank laughing. He was starting to get better. He was trying to throw off those chains that binded him so much. She was even able to get him to agree that he could go to confession, that maybe, just maybe, this could help him. And he was in there for quite some time. That, of course, is until the priest comes running out, never speaking to Maria again. A week after that, she was told that her job at the church had been eliminated. After that, Frank started sleeping in his tent alone again. You see, what happened is that the priest was unable to deal with the carnage, the horror that Frank Castle had done. It made that man of God very much understand what the devil is. But this also makes Frank Castle go back into his shell, believing that maybe he can confront these things, that he could be able to talk to somebody about it. But the first time that he does, he is immediately rejected. He is seen as a monster. His wife pays a toll for what he has done. At this point, Frank Castle knows that he is forsaken. As we jump back over to Daredevil's exorcism, believing maybe this worked. Maybe I was able to cleanse Frank Castle. But that is when the flames come up. Being caught off guard, we see Frank Castle come up and go for the Daredevil. Grabbing Daredevil by the neck, he tells him to look at him, to look Frank Castle in the eyes and tell me, do you see a man who is possessed? Daredevil recognizing that there is no possession here. He is not a puppet. He is not a lost soul in need of salvation. The Punisher is what he has always been. Daredevil telling him that now I see. It's not the beast that I should be worried about. It is you. With Frank Castle looking down, they find themselves floating about 15 feet off the ground. Letting Daredevil go, he is able to make his escape before all the ninja come for him. And Frank Castle is finally starting to realize what he is becoming. Now, as we jump back over to Maria, she is trying to let Frank Castle know that there are other churches. But after that encounter, he is never going back in a church. He also understands that the world is not safe. And so he gives a gun to Maria. He is going to teach her how to use it to protect them from the monsters that are out in the world. In present day, we have Frank Castle and Maria, with Maria dreaming the same dream over and over and over again, dreaming that there is a devil at the door, but she knows that she is safe as long as Frank Castle stands by her side. But she also comes to the realization that the children are never coming back, that the Archpriestess magic, it is just not good enough, not strong enough to resurrect the children. But she is beginning to remember more and more every single day. She does ask the question, why do they call you the Punisher? Maria is finally starting to get some more senses about her. She is starting to get more of her memory back. This is making her really start to question everything that is going on. On the outside of the forest that houses the Citadel of the Hand, we have the Apostles of War, the god of war Aries. His army stands at the gates, unable to break through the forest. Every man that they have sent in has not returned. But our god of war is angry. The Punisher made a god bleed. This means Aries is angry. When you make a god angry, you get an Armageddon. Having ninjas of the hand tied up, they are using them as guides to get through the forest. With Aries, his army of men and tanks, they make their march on the Citadel. Alright gang, so as we dive into issue number 8, we are picking up with the Punisher doing what he does best. Part of his daily ritual, that is to murder the sinners. All of these guys that he is killing, they have done something atrocious. In the midst of his killing, this is when he is let know that Aries and his army, they make their way through the forest. And while the Archpriestess believes this to be impossible, because the sickly ones planted those trees trees themselves. No one should be able to navigate those woods unless they have been through here. This is when she is informed that they are being led by Ninja of the Hand. And while the Archpriestess, she would love to go send out archers and take them all out. That way they can't find their way through the forest. Now Frank Castle, he wants to bring this all to an end. And so he says, let them come. That if we are to have this war, we will do it on our own ground. But the Archpriestess believes that Frank Castle is not ready. He has already shattered the dagger, even going as far as killing the Punisher. If it were not for the Beast and his magic, the Punisher would no longer be with us. This is when the Punisher, he tells them to release all the prisoners that remain, to give them swords, cut them loose, and if they can kill Frank Castle, then they are granted their freedom. Picking up those swords, they waste no time going in on the Punisher, and one by one, he is laying down the hate. But what we are really seeing, Frank Castle's powers from the Beast, this magic that he has been imbued with, it is beginning to fully kick in. Swords breaking on his arm, taking entire people and throwing them across the room. The flame that comes from his eyes. We see a sword dug into his stomach, and the Punisher does not flinch. In fact, the man who did that, we see Frank Castle punch right through their head, with the explosion and brain fragments going everywhere. She is seeing that Frank Castle, he is becoming everything that he was meant to be. The eyes, the fire, the marrow, the healing blood. He has manifested all but one of the great gifts of the fist. After this display, she knows that the Punisher is ready to face the God of War. This is when Frank Castle lets her know that those ninjas whose families had been murdered by the Archpriestess, he wants them sent to him, and he wants them to serve on his personal guard. What we see is the power dynamic truly shifting. The Archpriestess isn't calling the shots any longer. That he will prepare himself, she can excuse herself, telling the ninja to ensure that she stays inside the temple. But the Archpriestess, she doesn't mind giving up this power, because it is prophesied that his rage shall grow beyond all control. As we pick up with the wife of Frank Castle, as she tries to grasp on to any memories of her past. She wanders the halls of these temples, looking at the arsenal, admiring the warrior statues, trying to figure out who she is, trying to figure out where she belongs. So many memories she does not have anymore. This is when the Archpriestess comes to her, as she goes on to let her know exactly what this place is. This is a house of worship. When she goes to ask about her children, the Archpriestess lets her know that they are not here, that they were beyond the power of even the Beast. But Maria truly does want to remember. She wants to see them, to remember what happened to them. When asking questions, the only thing the Archpriestess lets her know is that you should talk to your husband. But Maria, she wants to find out answers, not knowing why she is here, not knowing what is going on in this place. That is when the Archpriestess puts her to sleep, returning her to her quarters, because war is on the horizon. That is where we see Aries and his apostles using their weapons of war. They make their way through the forest, having only one ninja remaining. They are using him to lead them to the Citadel. All of the other ninjas, they either sacrifice themselves or they have died. But Aries lets it be known that their punishment, it did not end with death, but they are currently in the pits of Hades, and they are getting flailed for eternity. The last ninja more than willing to lead them to the Citadel, if for no other reason than to watch the Punisher destroy the God of War. As Frank Castle looks off in the horizon, he can see the smoke. As the trees burn, the path gets closer and closer. This is when Frank Castle, he talks to the ninjas whose families had been murdered, letting them know that the death of their families at the hands of the Archpriestess, this was a terrible crime, one that will not go unpunished, just as their loyalty, their devotion to this war will not go unrewarded. The Punisher letting them know that if they win this war, they have his word that all of their families, they will be returned to them. them, and they will no longer need the priestess to do it. They won't need the prayers to any god. They just have to kill this one, having the dagger of the beast reforged, but he's having it reforged into bullets. As all the ninja raise up their swords in approval, yelling, "God bless the Punisher," we have Frank Castle going to his wife right before the battle, saying that he wanted to see her one last time, asking her to stay inside, saying that this will all be over soon. The Punisher goes and he prepares for battle. So as we dive into this issue, we are picking up with Daredevil having a conversation. He is talking to Wolverine. He is letting Logan know exactly what is going on with Frank Castle, that he has become more dangerous than he ever has before, that the Hand, they have offered him something that he could not refuse, the resurrection of his family. Now, even Wolverine does point out that he has had his family offered to him before, and he made that person suffer, buried them alive. Why would this time be any different? But the Hand have their ways. They are good at what they do. Now, maybe Frank Castle was truly destined to be their High Slayer. Maybe he is nothing more than a pawn. The only thing Daredevil can say for certain is that the power of the beast, now growing inside of the most prolific mass murderer who ever lived, present company excluded. But if Wolverine is gonna want some more answers, he is gonna have to go to Punisher and get them himself. What we are seeing is that Daredevil has no intention of fighting this battle one-on-one. He has no intention of this being a fair fight. He wants to bring down the Hand and Frank Castle. That is what throws us over to the Citadel of the Hand. The battle now underway. The God of War's tanks are exploding on sight. The front lines are charging at one another. And we see Frank Castle just cutting his way through everybody. With his beast-empowered guns, he's laying down that lead, he's slicing people with his sword, he is making an absolute bloodbath. As we watch Frank Castle just absolutely decimate Aries' forces, there is also narration from his wife, discussing how she always felt like the mistress, that war was always his true place, how she used to go and sneak out, go to the bars where veterans would hang out, wait for them to get drunk enough. That is when they would start to tell stories of Frank Castle. While this battle is ongoing, we take a jump to the past, with the High Priestess talking to some of the ninja. What they are discussing is that Frank Castle hasn't killed a single person since he left the Marine Corps. Some of the ninja are concerned that Frank Castle isn't the man that they are looking for. That is when the ninja suggest that maybe, just maybe, they go kill Frank Castle's family because he has been flying kites. His relationship with his wife has gotten better. He seems to be a devoted family man, believing that the course he is on, he will inevitably never become the man that they need him to be. But the Archpriestess says no, that they could go and do this, but only the beast may so, that the beast must provide. If Frank Castle is meant to be the king of killers, then it will be the will of the beast. Going on to say that this is just the beginning of Frank Castle's rise. That is what picks us up with Black Widow. She has been doing some investigation. Everything that they are saying about Frank Castle is true, saying that they are even responsible for what happened to Hatemonger and a Hydra cell. Now, Black Widow doesn't find it surprising that he is doing this, but Captain America, the old soldier inside of him, had always held out hope that Frank Castle could be saved. But now that he has taken over the largest groups of assassins the world has ever seen, he supposes it is time that that soldier accepts defeat. As they prepare how to take down Frank, we are taken back to the battle. The High Priestess praying as the battle is ongoing. We see Maria, Frank Castle's wife, wielding a gun, walking through the halls, going up to the statue of the beast, saying that he is not allowed to have Frank because her husband is hers. But with the battle still raging on, we see Aries versus Punisher. The two of them going blow for blow, both of them bleeding profusely. Frank Castle using that beast-empowered gun. He puts a couple rounds into Aries' chest. Though this doesn't stop him, it slows him down. That gives Frank the opportunity to lay down the hate with Aries on his knees. His last words to Frank Castle is that he is proud of him. That is when Frank Castle, he puts a bullet right into the god's head, dropping Aries down to the ground. All of the apostles, they bend the knee. They praise the new god of war. But as he walks past all of the God of War's ranks, we see them all burst into flames. Because there is no mercy. There is no joining forces. With the battle being won, Frank Castle returns to the compound. When the Archpriestess goes to say hello, we see that the ninja, they push her away. It appears that the priestess has been replaced by his wife. Or at least that is what it seems. Now she could just be playing along. She could just be trying to win her husband back. Because she knows that he may have been born in the war, but he had chose her. And no war could ever tear them apart. When she asks Frank if it's done, is it all finished now? With glowing red eyes, he says almost. That is what takes us to the Midnight Mission. Moon Knight sitting down discussing how the Apostles of War were defeated and Frank Castle killed Aries himself. The others in the room shocked to hear this because Aries is a god. But the word is that the Punisher flies now. If anything that they have heard about Frank Castle is true, then they are all in agreement. They all imagined that this day would come sooner or later. The day where all of them finally have to answer the question, how do you solve a problem like Frank Castle? That is where we see that this is not only Moon Knight, but this is also the return of Doctor Strange. Alright gang, so as we dive into this issue, we are getting a recap from Daredevil, letting us know exactly what is going on with the Punisher, the man known as Frank Castle, a murderer, killing criminals in his deluded war that only he sees. And for a very long time, he was a solo individual, someone that was his own army. That is until the Hand had took him in, until the High Priestess turned him into the Fist of the Beast. They made him a leader, they gave him an army, and now he is hell on earth. But this is a game of prophecy. At least that is what Stick and Elektra continuously tell him. That is what takes us to Daredevil and Elektra. We see that Daredevil is preparing to head out. Elektra letting it be known that they need to focus on the war ahead. The prophecy foretold saying that one of them will die. That they need to be prepared, they need to be ready. The truth is, Daredevil is sick and tired of prophecies. Between Goldie and these prophecies, he feels as if there is no free will, as if he doesn't have a choice in anything that is about to happen. He feels that these prophecies are nothing more than a trap, a way of making them unsure and baiting them in. He is a man of his convictions. He has always aimed to help people, and that is exactly what they are gonna go out and do today. That is what takes us to Charlotte, North Carolina, an apartment complex surrounded by police. There is a company that is currently evicting everybody from their homes, using the police, using the law to do so. That is why Daredevil and his men have shown up today. From Bullet to Speed Demon, Daredevil is letting them know that these individuals are lawbreakers. That they are bending, they are turning, they are messing with the laws, using the police as their brute force. As the police make their way in, kicking down doors, evicting people from their homes. All of these people being given eviction notice based on manufactured lease violations. Which is saying that these people, they have done nothing to deserve eviction. It is all lies, it is all creation so that they can bulldoze down this building. This is all because of the developer known as as Castle Max. As the police try and evict these individuals, that is where Daredevil shows up on scene. The police saying that they are going to arrest them, Daredevil wastes no time attacking these police officers, letting them know that these people are only protecting their property, that your job is to be helping people. If you are not in the line of work to want to help individuals, then find a different job. Daredevil trying to remain as cool as possible. That is where we pick up with Bullet, one of these police officers striking a child. Bullet, unable to stop himself, he knocks this cop right against the face. Daredevil coming in to let Bullet know that use violence only when necessary, that hurting him will only make him feel better, that it is a selfish act. That is when Daredevil is able to hear that there are explosives in the bottom of this building. That is where Speed Demon comes into play. With Daredevil having his fist-enhanced senses. They are overwhelming at times, but he is learning how to use them properly. With this enhanced ability, he is able to detect exactly where this explosive is in the building. Getting Speed Demon there, they deactivate it. This bomb had been planted by Castle Max. What Daredevil was not aware of was the other explosive that was on top of the roof. A young girl up here, the police trying to grab hold of her. Getting Speed Demon up there, he doesn't make it in time. We see the explosive go off. The girl goes falling from the building. Lucky for her, Stiltman was there to save the day. With Stiltman grabbing hold of the girl, the police running from the building. The captain obviously furious, telling his men to get back inside. This is where we have an attorney representing the residents. A court injunction delaying the evictions due to new evidence. All of this orchestrated by Daredevil, because while he may be a very good superhero, he is an even better lawyer. That is what takes him to the CEO of Castle Max. They have come directly to the source. Daredevil is here threatening him, terrifying him, letting him know that these people will remain in their homes. No more false evictions. No more pushing people into the streets. That if you do, Daredevil will be back. As they make their exit, this is where we have Bullet and Daredevil have a conversation. Bullet saying that violence, it's not always physical. We just scared the living hell out of that CEO. He is going to have nightmares from this moment forward. Now, Bullet fully does appreciate everything that Daredevil has been doing. That he wants to try to do something different. Instead of beating these people up and throwing them in prison, Daredevil is trying to rehabilitate them. But Bullet is letting it know that he can't be on the island any longer. His son Lance is out there without a father, and he feels that he needs to be there with him. And at first, Daredevil, he tries to talk against this, but he knows that he cannot force these individuals to stay. He knows that the others will see this as nothing more than a prison that they had escaped from. That it may be a mistake, but he has to let them do this. Giving him a jewel, letting him know that to communicate any moment that he may need them. As they return back, Elektra does notice that one of them is missing. But giving that jewel, this also gives Daredevil the opportunity to kind of spy on them. This is Daredevil's way of keeping tabs and making sure that they stay on the straight and narrow. But Stick is letting us know that the book is active. It is writing itself. It is revealing more. It is letting us know that Frank Castle is on a murdering spree. He thinks there are a town of killers that need to be wiped out. Thousands are going to die if they do not stop him. When Daredevil goes to look at the book, he can see that he can read it. Everything is there. Daredevil's entire life. This makes him think about Goldie and how he might not actually have free will. This is when they get communication from Bullet, letting him know that the hand they have taken his son. They are currently jumping him. He tries to fight off all the ninja. The ninja letting Daredevil know that if he wishes to have the murderer spared, then he knows where to go. Stick does not question this in the slightest bit. The book says that they need to go, this is very clear. They need to go face off against Frank Castle. Elektra beginning to understand that this may very well be a trap. But Daredevil has no other option. He knows that Frank Castle will kill Bullet. That is what he does to criminals. But he also knows that Frank Castle will not kill an innocent, that the child needs rescuing, and it is his job to do so. That is where we hear the bells of war begin to ring. He tells his army that they are not ready. The forces that they are about to face completely outnumber them. Daredevil says that they are not ready, that it is too soon, that they cannot take on all of this, but there is a child. He says these words, but they hang in the air. But there is a child. Alright gang, so we are picking up right in the midst of battle. The hand versus the fist. We see ninja left and right, they are falling. The Punisher's forces having the power of the undead. They are fighting against literal skeletons. And to make the situation even worse, Frank Castle has a freaking dragon. Not really sure where this came from. It just popped up in the last issue. I actually thought it was kind of more of a metaphor. But no, this is a literal dragon that Frank Castle is riding on. That is where we see Frank Castle leap from the dragon and he goes toe-to-toe with Daredevil. Daredevil is here for one goal. It is to save that kid. But he cannot help himself believe that Frank Castle has to die. He believes in saving all of God's creatures. But Frank Castle doesn't belong to God. Maybe he never has. He is a butcher, twisted up by hellfire and dark magic. He wants all of this to end right now. As these two titans clash together, we have Cole that is making his way through the lines. Zombies, lifeless and unmoving. He is pulling out his pistol and he is shooting everything that he can. He finds himself going against Bullet. Bullet being taken over by the Talisman, completely unaware that his son had been kidnapped. As Cole and Bullet fight one another, we pick back up with Daredevil and Punisher. Daredevil telling Frank that he told him to abandon all of this madness, that he is being used. But Frank doesn't care. The only thing he cares about is the mission. Going on to call him a phony. He is a man that released murderers out of prison, that he has let him live all of this time because he was keeping scum off of the streets. But now that he is just releasing them and inscripting them into his army, he is going to make him burn. That is where we see the dragon come up behind Frank's shoulder. He opens up his mouth and he lets out a great flame. But the dragon's flame, it hits Frank Castle instead. That is because of Stegron. He is able to control reptilian creatures. One of this size he can't really control, but he can throw the dragon off balance. This gives the other members of the team to come in with cables and swords. They start pinning up this dragon. They tie up his feet, they tie up his neck. They keep him from being able to truly open up his wingspan. And they are able to put down this dragon, at least for the moment, taking one of the biggest weapons off the battlefield. That is where we pick up with Cole making his way through Bullet. With a little bit of help, they are able to take him over. They plan to take him back to the base. Cole cutting through the lines, he finds that young boy. He finds young Lance. Having the kid put the shield onto his back, he throws young Lance over his shoulder, the boy holding on. And we see Cole just shooting and punching his way through these lines. Punisher and Daredevil still going toe-to-toe, telling Daredevil that his god is dead, that his blood rained down on him, blood that ran through his wife and his children. He is saying that he is avenging his god, as the two of them keep exchanging blows. Daredevil telling Frank that he is all out of bullets, all out of blades, that he has nothing and he is nothing, that God is very much alive. He is what lets you breathe that air every single day. As Daredevil steps on him and starts to drown him in the puddle, letting Frank know that God has sent him to finally remedy the mistake of keeping Frank alive. Daredevil is here to be his Punisher. Picking up with Elektra and Akka, the two of them fighting one another. Elektra gets a sigh right into her stomach. finding herself too distracted. Akka had played with her, had manipulated her, had used her emotions against her to get the upper hand, with Speed Demon coming in and grabbing her very quickly. The dragon had broke free. Unable to control it, we see Daredevil hopping onto the dragon. He left Frank Castle, focusing on protecting his men. His magic heightened senses. He can feel everything. He can feel the very heart, the very soul of this dragon, knowing that no creature is born evil. He connects with the dragon and he sets it free. As the dragon takes off into the air with Daredevil still on his back, the dragon is free. The boy has been saved. He can hear it all. His people are losing. More hand reinforcements are making their way there. His wife is dying. It is time to let go. As he falls off of the dragon, that is where Stiltman comes in and he grabs Daredevil from falling to his death. As Daredevil's forces go into full retreat, Punisher a little bit confused. Akka lets it be known that they realize that they are outmatched, that they lost. Daredevil on the plane with Elektra sitting here bleeding out. Elektra is still very much alive and she was able to grab the talisman, the secret to the hand's resurrection powers. Being too preoccupied with stabbing Elektra, she didn't see Elektra grab it from around her neck. Though they still lost this battle, they still need to defeat the hand. But Daredevil knows it won't be because of some prophecy, not because they were forced into battle. They will fight them on their own terms. Now that they have the talisman, they are going to win. That is where we pick up with Iron Man, Captain America, and Spider-Man. They are all sitting around saying that they slipped up. A magical veil had been hiding them, but they left the veil, and now they are headed back to their base. Someone on the inside, Captain America says they have seen the light and have given them exact coordinates. They broke murderers out of prison. Now they have a responsibility to stop them. They have to stop Daredevil. Alright gang, so we are picking up with Maria and Frank sitting down with a therapist. They are currently doing couples counseling because ever since Frank has gotten home from war, they are having trouble connecting. To be more specific, Frank is having a hard time readjusting to this life, and the therapist lets him know that it is perfectly normal to feel disconnected, to feel detached from civilian life when he is home and on leave. But it is also important to acknowledge the challenges that his partner and children face while he adjusts to all of this. The way Frank sees it, they have a roof over their head, they have some money in the bank, the kids are healthy. He knows that things aren't perfect, but he knows that the world out there is so much harder for so many. And Maria knows that she's lucky. She knows that she's not some spoiled brat unaware of the horrors of the world. But she also doesn't want Frank comparing everything to the worst of the worst. Right now, he is making it sound like it's unreasonable for wanting her husband to communicate and be present. But after this session, the therapist suggests that he start writing down in a journal. And that is where the war journal truly begins. As the two of them discuss an incident that had happened. There was a Little League game. Frank had gotten angry. As they dive into what had happened, we learn that there was a dad there that was an alcoholic. His son had missed a catch. Once they got back to the car, the father began to yell at the child, to hit the child. When the mother tried to interfere, the drunk man also hit her. And as everybody pretended that they didn't see anything that happened, Frank became more angry. The therapist asking how he felt about this and if he called the authorities. But Frank knows that there is no point, that you cannot change men like this. And of course, the therapist believes that proper help anybody can change. And while Frank says that maybe in a perfect world that could happen, but the truth is, this world is not perfect. And Frank smashed that guy's face into the freaking wall. But we pick up with Frank writing in his journal, not really sure what to write. He has been home for a few weeks at this point, and it's been nice for the most part. Maria turned their guest room into an office, which she called a man cave. Painted, moved all his stuff in here, got all of his posters framed. She really went out of her way to find some kind of recluse area where he could be, but also be at home. They all loved it when Frank was home. Maria's true intention was hoping that this would want him to really stay home, that it might help him with all the boredom. And if he's got to admit, it does feel nice to be back. The days sometimes seem to blend together, and this is what gets him thinking about something that his uncle had told him after coming home from Vietnam. The only time that he ever talked about the war. He said that they had taught him to fight, to kill, to starve, to expect and accept death. But no one ever told him what he would lose if he were to survive. As he gives us this little story from his uncle, he is doing the day-to-day, mowing the lawn, loving his wife, taking the dog out for a walk. And his uncle had said that they never told him that his greatest achievements, the most important events of his life, his greatest triumphs and sorrows, they wouldn't count for anything when you got back home. They didn't tell him that he had missed the battlefield, because in a horrible way, it made sense. Sometimes more than life back home. That you would see what people are truly capable of, and you can never unsee it again. Didn't tell him that the things he would see with his eyes would never leave him again. That you will never be able to unlearn the things that you know. His uncle didn't know that he would lose so much of what made life worth living. Ever since then, he has been thinking back to his uncle, all the things that his uncle lost in his war, and Frank has been wondering if he ever had any of those in the first place. That is what takes us to Halloween, and this day it went wrong from the beginning. The truth is, Frank forgot to get a costume, and Maria wasn't angry, she was just disappointed. He tried to play it off like he was going to be a burglar, but it really didn't work. They are supposed to be going to a Halloween party, and the invitations, they had said no mask and no weapons. But Frank still goes. He goes with his family, they do the trick-or-treating. As they're doing this, Frank hears somebody screaming. Maria telling him that it's Halloween in suburbia. This is not a battlefield that you need to relax. The truth is, Maria believes that he is paranoid. Thinks that he is looking for trouble. This is where we see the entire neighborhood alive. Everybody out conversing, talking with one another, celebrating this festive day. This is where he picks up with a conversation between two individuals in the neighborhood. They ask Frank, "Do you think that there is such a thing as a just war?" And that is when Frank says that there are necessary wars. Now, of course, they don't see the world as Frank does. They don't see how any necessary risk to American life could be worth it. Specifically, it seems that they are talking about the Middle East, about why we should even have troops over there in the first place. That how can our soldiers even be able to tell apart on who is civilian and who is enemy. Frank making a comment that you start with the people who strap explosives to children and work from there. As it gets later in the evening, Maria comes up to Frank, who is sitting by himself with the dog. She asks him where home is, a question that she has continued to ask him. But she also asks, why did he bring that stuff up? The stuff about the war and childs being used as explosives. But they did ask him, and that stuff is his life. For the past few months and years, it has been everything 24/7. As they continue discussing all of this going on, they return home for the night. Maria asking Frank if he is coming to bed. He says he's going to as soon as he walks the dog. Walking the dog down the road, he knew that he heard something before. Not a scream of frightened delight, but involuntary, pained and desperate. A sound that he knows all too well. As he stops in front of a house, there's some giant lug of a man, letting Frank know that his dog is peeing on his car. It looks like this might just get into a little altercation, but this is when a woman and two gentlemen come out of the house. They escort her out, put her into the car, and they drive down the road. And Frank Castle knows mobsters when he sees them. While he hasn't kept up with the local underworld scum, he knows a wise guy when he sees one. Going off into the woodline just a little bit, he ties up the dog to a tree. He puts on that ski mask, and he goes to investigate. TV on in the living room, but down in the basement, we have 3 individuals that are being tied up, and 1 madman. By the looks of it, they seem to have been here for a couple of days. They have been cutting off hands, they have been cutting off feet, Frank knew that he should have trusted his gut. He should have came prepared. But that's not going to stop him from going in. He picks up a brick and he smashes in the dude's head that is standing guard on the outside. As another gentleman comes out, Frank grabs hold of him and breaks his neck. Walking into the room, he sees that there is a man naked tied up on the ground. As Frank goes to set this guy free, cutting the gag from his mouth, he begins to holler, calling to the other thugs, letting them know that there is somebody here. And so Frank immediately picking up a pan, waiting for someone to come into the room. The first guy gets smashed in the face. 3 other individuals in the living room. One by one, they come for Frank. And Frank just begins to demolish these guys. One by one, he is smashing their faces in. He is laying down the hate. That's when the individual that is tied up naked, he is able to crawl over and he bites Frank on the ankle. As Frank drives his foot right into this guy's face, we see that someone came in from behind him and they stuck him with something. That's where Frank wakes up in the basement, tied up, and this psychopath is continuing his torturing. Frank is not sure how long he has been out, but by listening to the TV upstairs, he can assume that it's been roughly an hour. The cops had come and gone in the pockets of these scumbags. That's good news for Frank because there will be no investigation because he has every intention of killing this man. That's when this guy goes over to Frank, takes off his mask. He knows who he is. He is the man from down the street. The Italian man, the soldier, the Marine. This is where we see that Frank is able to break the zip ties because they were put on too tight, bulldogging this guy into the ground. Frank's body is still very clumsy. The killer grabbing a saw, getting ready to cut his throat. Frank grabs a needle and shoves it into this guy's eye. Taking this opportunity, he begins cutting everybody free, letting them know to get out of here as quickly as possible. Now back home, Maria goes looking for Frank only to find his journal on the table. Frank currently battling against this man that was torturing these people. Maria reading his journal. The question that she had been asking, where is home? The truth is, Frank didn't want to hurt her. He didn't want to lie to her. So he never answered. With Frank picking up a board and cracking this dude's skull wide open. Knocking him out, he pours gasoline everywhere. He lights a match and he burns it down. Getting out of the house, there is still a goon alive. A goon that starts opening up with his weapon. He is shooting at him, but then there is a giant explosion. And all those rounds that had been fired at him, he found where they landed. As he makes his way into the woodline, he finds that his dog is dead. The rounds that were meant for him, they landed in the dog. And so he carries the dead dog back home. In the backyard, digging up a hole. Maria hears this. She goes out to look, anger in her face, but she says nothing. She had asked Frank Castle where is home. He expected her to ask the question again. He is dreading it, but he still wants her to ask. He wants to explain, but she already has her answer. Alright gang, so as we dive into issue number 10, it opens up with a gory scene of people in pieces falling out of a plane. This comes with a news report. In the skies over Argentina, at approximately 11 a.m. local time, a commercial flight had reported that they had flown into the unthinkable, a hail of body parts at 40,000 feet. The jet seen here reportedly belonged to sex trafficker August Smith, one who had been evading international authorities for months now. We see a yacht that is sinking into the ocean, and we see General Illa Vox being killed by none other than the Punisher. The general believed that he was safe, even calling this bunker Punisher-proof. Obviously, that is not the case. It has been a bad day for some of the worst human beings on the face of this earth. This is where Frank Castle goes and he gets into his Blackhawk. And he only has one question. That question is who is next? Returning back home that evening, telling Maria that the work has been better than ever. And he always says that his work is almost done. But it seems that Frank Castle's work will never be done, and Maria is starting to understand this. That's where the Archpriestess and Maria have a conversation. Maria is growing stronger by the day, in all sorts of ways. The Archpriestess saying that Maria may be wondering if there is a day that they no longer need the Archpriestess. The Archpriestess says that that is not happening, that she is not going anywhere, and neither is Maria. But what Maria says next is quite shocking, saying that she only just came back. Why would she go? Though she still doesn't have all her memories, or doesn't understand why her children didn't come with her, wondering if she will ever be pregnant again. The Archpriestess tells her that even the power of a god has limits. But the truth is, Maria just wants the Punisher to do what he says. She wants him to turn away from whatever nonsense that he has got himself involved in, and be the only family that she has left. This is where we are thrown back into the past. Back in the days when Frank had just come home from war, him and Maria were doing relatively well. Frank had decided to get a second job, and while Maria does her best to try and make conversation, we see that the Punisher, Frank Castle, doesn't really want to have that much of a talk. We see that there is still distance between them, with Frank saying that he better get going. Maria knew that there was something going on. There was a secret that he was keeping, and what she learned what he was truly doing. He was headed to Rikers Island. There was an execution that had been scheduled. He came in quietly, never said anything to anyone. From what she saw, he just liked to be there. He liked to watch the executions. And Frank would come home. The nights after an execution, he'd fall asleep right away. He would sleep like a baby. He would come home and go right to sleep so that he wouldn't have to touch his wife after seeing his other lover. That lover being death. Picking up back in present day with Frank telling his wife that this is all ending soon. This is the same thing he says every single day. After today, the work will be done. Frank Castle goes out there and he does his work. It is always the same thing over and over again. This time, Maria tells him to don't come home again. Don't come home until you are coming home. With Frank Castle storming out to go get the work done, Maria is having one of the ninja guide her around this compound, this citadel. She wants to see every single room. She wants to know what is in this place. While that's ongoing, we jump back to the past. The next time Frank left for his night job, she had decided this time she was going to confront him. She knew that he liked to have a drink after an execution. Before coming home to his wife, he would go to the bar, he would sit down and have a drink. It was a bar full of veterans who had been laughing loudly and swapping war stories for hours. That is until Frank came in. And then everybody had the utmost respect for Frank Castle. Not a single one of them would not call him Sir or Captain Castle. But this evening there was a guy who was loud, he was drunk, talking about his war stories, talking about all the people he had killed, talking about his excessive body count, so on and so forth. Guys like this, in real life, they're usually not the guys that have ever pulled the trigger. One that will sit there and brag about all the people he has killed. These are usually the fakes. But this guy's getting loud, he's getting rowdy, he is just absolutely obliterated drunk, and he starts getting all over Frank Castle. Going on about these stories, Frank is unable to hold back his rage. We see Frank completely annihilate this guy's face, and everybody sat there watching, mesmerized. What Frank didn't know is that Maria was in the corner of the bar. She was sitting there waiting to confront him. It took 10 men to drag Frank Castle off of this guy. That day, she saw Frank Castle for the man that she married. Perhaps for the very first time, she understands who Frank is. That night, he had slept like a rock, perhaps more than he had in whole months. She never said a word about that day. What was truly frightening to her, for a moment, watching him almost kill that horrible man, she liked it. She saw what the world was trying to make of Frank Castle, what he could be if only he could get out of his own way. And the truth is, Maria thought it was good. This is where we pick up in present day with Maria finally finding the gravestones of her children. All the failed attempts at bringing them back to life. At this point, she doesn't understand what is truly going on. And while she is discovering this, Frank Castle, he is doing what he does best. He is being the king of killers. He is slashing, he is destroying, he is absolutely laying down the hate on any bad guy that stands in his way. But Frank Castle is also changing. He now sees his fellow men as the Beast sees them, as things of meat. He sees all of their sin. When he looks at people now, he only hears them saying what they have done or what they will do. They have killed and hated. They have killed, hated, and hurt. He has seen the sins that they have already committed, even the ones that have yet to happen. The sins that are just dreams. And once the Punisher kills the sinful for what is in their hearts, he will have cast aside all earthly things and become the Beast's gospel made flesh, the high priest of the Red Worship, deliverer of the sanctaments of steel. After today, there will be no more questions on who deserved to sit upon the sickly throne. This is where a young boy stands before him wielding a gun. This boy has not sinned yet, but he will. He has been raised to kill for hate. Someday he hopes to. Someday he will. But Frank stays his hand, as we see Maria absolutely freaking out trying to figure out what Frank did, seeing all of these gravestones to their children. We see that boy come running out from the Punisher. They're letting him escape. Frank says to bring him the chopper, to send a message to the Citadel to his wife, to tell her that he is finished, to tell her he is coming home. And as he breaks his sword, this is where we see Doctor Strange, Wolverine, Moon Knight, Captain America, and Black Widow. They have all come to finally stop the Punisher. We have Maria, who is really starting to come to terms with who Frank Castle is. The two of them had started going to the shooting range together, but at some point, Frank had stopped going. He came to the understanding that Maria was using this as an opportunity to get him to talk. She knew anytime that he would have a gun in his hand, he would be more able, more open to discuss what he is feeling and what he is thinking. But what she also didn't realize is how quickly things were changing, how much their lives were changing forever. If only she had known how much this day was going to change everything. That's what picks us up in present day. Our makeshift Avengers team has taken down all the forces that are around Frank Castle. They have bound him in chains, and Doctor Strange is working with all of his power to try and free Frank Castle. But this is a long process. You could consider this part brain surgery, part bomb disposal. If he does this wrong, it could obliterate the soul of Frank Castle, with Captain America reminding everybody that the job is to bring him in. They are not here to kill the Punisher, but Moon Knight would say that he never voted on that. But this is when Doctor Strange begins to lose control. The Punisher fighting the anesthesia spell. We see him begin to break free of his chains. That is when Doctor Strange tells everybody to run. With a huge magical explosion, we see Frank Castle lay one right across the face of Doctor Strange, breaking right through his protective spell. When Wolverine goes in to give him a nice stabbing, Frank Castle catches his hand and he turns it around, jabbing the claws of Wolverine right into Wolverine's face. And then Captain America calls out Captain Castle. He tells the Marine to stand down, that this is an order, that his war has finally come to an end. This puts Frank at pause, but he says, "Yes sir, it finally is." And then he flies off. As we jump back into the past, we see that Maria had hired a private investigator to follow Frank around, telling him all the way to Queens. She wanted to know where he was going and what he was up to. But when this PI thought he had the upper hand, we see Frank Castle come from behind him, put a gun to his head, and told him to tell Maria I was having an affair, and then don't ever follow me again. Reporting back to Maria, she was able to hear the fear that was in the voice of the private investigator. She knew that Frank had got to him, and when he wasn't out and about, he was working on the van, one he had brought home from the junkyard. He would always talk about the family trips that they would take in this, but day after day he would strip down the engine and put it back together. There were nights where she would go outside, sleep in the tent, just hoping that he might come over to her. We are seeing that Maria and Frank, they were truly broken. Frank never found his way home and she never had the love of her life back. Maybe she's coming to the realization that she never had him to begin with. Now, taking us back to present day, Doctor Strange in the air going after the Punisher. He tells Frank that you should have come to me. You should have come to me and I would have told you the price that you have to pay when you mess with this kind of ancient magic. And while Frank doesn't truly understand what he's talking about, all Frank knows is that his family has paid enough. This is where Doctor Strange tries to remind him that your family is dead, or at least they are supposed to be, with Black Widow and Moon Knight going in on him. Once he has been knocked down to the ground, this is still not enough to take him down. We see that he is still as powerful as ever, but he says that his war is finished, that he is done with the Beast, he is done with all of this. As soon as he is done with them, he tells them that they have no clue how much he is restraining himself, how much he is restraining the Beast from tearing them apart. This is where Captain America throws his shield and says, show me what you have become, so what I'm about to do, I will feel much better about. But Frank knows where he belongs. He apologizes to Cap, but says that there is nobody that is going to stop him from going home. He is going home to Maria. His war has come to an end, and not even Captain America can stand in his way. As we get a very quick glimpse into the past, we are seeing that one fateful day, the day in the park. None of them know what is about to happen, but we all fully understand. This is the day that Frank Castle lost his family. As it begins to slowly build the scene, in present day, Maria is learning of everything the Punisher has become. The man that Frank became after his family had died. She is getting the whole story from A to Z about his relentless crusade to take down the mob-related shootouts, to take down anybody who had anything to do with his family. Maria now in tears and screaming, seeing what Frank has done in the name of her, in the name of their children. While she observes this, we see that Frank Castle is still fighting away at the Avengers. And while he's doing a relatively good job of holding these guys off, he is taking one heck of a beating. As he goes and flies off, he tries to make his escape. Going through the forest, the trees begin to grab hold of all the heroes. This is giving Frank the opportunity to make his getaway. He comes through that doorway. He goes searching for Maria, and he lets her know that his work is done, that the war is over, and now he is finally home. And while she tells him that she waited so long for him, the truth is, Frank never came home. This is where she pulls up the pistol and she takes a shot at the Punisher. She puts a bullet right into his chest. You see, she has come to understand that her husband, he died that day in Central Park, along with his family. All he is now is the Punisher. She has seen what he has done in their name and the name of their children. She has seen it all. As she says, all hail the King of Killers. She puts another round into Frank Castle, with our last panel showing the deadly scene, the scene where his family had been murdered. Moments before, Maria was saying that she wanted a divorce, but she never was able to get those words fully out. You see, their relationship had been long broken, long before he became the Punisher, long before she was ever resurrected. This family was already broken. That is because Frank wasn't being the man that he wanted to be. He is a killer. He is the Punisher. The family was nothing more than a front. It was a temporary distraction from everything that he wanted to be. He lived and thrived in the chaos of war, of battle, of combat. And Maria is now seeing that the man she once loved, he is long gone. And so now it is time to put an end to his reign. Alright gang, so as we dive into this issue, we are picking up with the Punisher bleeding out on the ground. He calls out to his wife who is already left. He is only met by the Archpriestess. As all the ninjas surround him, they go to pick up the Lord Punisher, but the Archpriestess, she lets it be known that he is going to be left here, that he is not of their concern. With the Avengers stepping at the door, the Sorcerer Supreme and his allies coming through, she tells all of the ninja that they must go fight, that they must protect the Citadel. This is when the Archpriestess goes on to let him know that she's not surprised in Frank's failure, though part of her had really hoped this would end differently, that he would prove himself to be the Beast's true messiah. This was nothing more than wishful thinking. He failed in his mission. He committed the greatest blasphemy before his Lord and Savior. He refused to kill, holding back at that compound in the previous issue, deciding not to kill that child, to return home only to be shot down by his traitorous wife. Frank Castle thought that he could walk away, but the Archpriestess, she has worked for years trying to have him transcend. She has watched him from the earliest of ages, trying to mold him into the fist of the beast. She gave everything to make sure Frank Castle ended up at this point in time in history. But the Archpriestess also knew that he would always fail. He had to fail before he could rise again, before he could truly rise. But she says that they will try again. Lifting up that pistol, she says that they will try again once she has brought him back, once he has truly fallen, once he has lost everything. And this time, they plan to leave Maria in the ground. This is where Frank lets it be known that he has just enough power to do some damage. Before the Archpriestess is able to take her shot, we see the beast flames surround her. Taking this opportunity, she runs. And just as she breaks through the wall, the Avengers come in. Frank Castle has finally been caught. This is what takes us to beneath the sanctum, with Frank Castle bound in chains by the Sorcerer Supreme. Captain America had insisted on the chains, but the Sorcerer Supreme knows that the Beast no longer lives inside of Frank, that those powers are gone. But Doctor Strange is simply saying that the chains aren't important, because right now, underneath in this basement of the sanctum, even Doctor Strange gets lost down here sometimes. You can easily take a wrong turn. You could be wandering forever through Weird World. But Frank Castle's days are over. The only question now is what to do with him. While everybody has their opinions, others are more final than some other opinions. The only thing Frank really cares about is where is Maria. He tells Doctor Strange that you can do anything. You can kill me, you can chain me, you can lock me up for the rest of eternity. The only thing he truly cares about is making sure that nobody tries to kill Maria. While she could be considered an abomination, her resurrection and that alone, she was given life back and he wants her to have it. The biggest question that Doctor Strange wants to know is why. And Frank lets him know that this wasn't the Beast controlling me. This wasn't the Archpriestess manipulating me. Frank Castle knew exactly what he was doing. He waged his war. He did all of this so that Maria could return. And if he was given the opportunity again, there is no doubt in his mind he would take the deal. He would become the Fist of the Beast. That they may want to say that Frank was simply taken over, that this possession is what caused him to be the man that stands before them. But he's not lying to anybody. He's not gonna lie and make it to where they can sleep soundly at night, knowing that Frank Castle may still be a good man. The truth is, Frank Castle is a murderer. Frank Castle is a killer. And given the opportunity to bring his wife back, he would make the entire world burn. But it's also more than that, because there is a war that has been raging on for years. One that Doctor Strange and the Avengers, they really just pass right by. Doctor Strange finding this almost comical, because his wife had put 2 into his chest. If it weren't for Doctor Strange, he would be dead right now. But he does give those bullets to him, saying that there's still mystical power inside of them. He says that there is always a price for this kind of magic, but now they must decide what to do with an unrelenting mass murderer. How do they punish him? And so they come one by one, Wolverine being the first. Wolverine wants him to admit that he screwed up, to give Wolverine a reason not to kill the Punisher. The way the Punisher sees it, If they are going to kill the Punisher, they must also kill Wolverine. At this point, the Punisher may have a higher body count, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Wolverine still has a very big body count himself. Black Widow being the next one to come in. And while she does try to connect with him, he's simply letting her know that me and you are only friends on the stipulation that I am a weapon, that you are a weapon. Together, we are absolutely devastating. But that is where the line for our friendship is drawn. We both know what this is. The only thing he says is make sure that Maria isn't thrown into a hole as well. And then Moon Knight. Now Moon Knight sees this situation a little differently. While everyone has been focused on the Beast, Moon Knight understands mental illness better than anybody else. He can see that this is all derived from a much earlier date, way before war, way before the Beast. The Punisher has trauma that cuts deep, that goes all the way back to his childhood. And so Moon Knight, he would actually like to see the Punisher get some true help. Because if anybody understands how difficult it is to deal with these kind of mental illnesses, it is Moon Knight. So he doesn't want to see Frank Castle punished in a manner that could just leave him in a cell for the rest of his life. He wants to see him healed. He wants to see him fixed, believing that Captain America would be the next one to come in. This is where we have Maria. This throws him off his game a little bit, asking how she is, because they believe she wasn't able to leave the Citadel. Doctor Strange was able to take down those barriers, and now Maria can go wherever she chooses. But Maria has come to say goodbye. They have taken all of his assets, and they have divided it in half. Sold the safe houses, all of his guns, all of his weapons, everything. The other half of the money they donated to charities in the name of their children, letting him know that this is how you honor your dead family, not by using them as an excuse to be an executioner. She has come to remind him that his family had already been taken from him, not in that fateful day where they died. She was going to leave him. He had lost his family all on his own. And so now it is finally goodbye, saying that once you do finally disappear into whatever abyss they decide to hurl you into, do everybody a favor and stay dead. In a fit of rage, we see him begin to punch the ground. This is a story of a war, the story of a boy on a roof, a family in a park, a fist of the Beast, the story of a Punisher who had no regrets. This is the story of Frank Castle's war and how it ended. Dropping down to his knees, he begins to pray, calling out to the Beast, asking him to hear his prayers. This is where Captain America and the rest come in to let him know that it is time. They took a vote, though it wasn't unanimous. They have decided what's to be done with him. Before Cap can even say those words, Frank lets it be known that he doesn't want to hear it. He is not here to hear their judgment, so he has come up with his own. With a little help from the power of the Beast, we see the power engulf him. The Avengers try to jump in, but he disappears and it is already too late, saying to spread out and find him. Doctor Strange lets us know that he is gone. He is no longer within this plane of existence. The Punisher is no more. This is where we pick up with Maria, her bags of cash, new car, and she is headed out of New York. But on top of that bag of money, what we see is a pregnancy test. This resurrected Maria, she is pregnant with Frank Castle's child. And that's when we finally get a glimpse of when all of this started. The Archpriestess bringing his wife before him. At first, he doesn't believe that this is his wife. He has believed that she is dead. But when she begins to talking of the memories that they have shared together, that they have had, and in that moment, he was unable to refuse it. He brought his wife in close, and that was the beginning of the Beast. Now, this is what takes us to an epilogue. We are picking up in Weird World. This is day 5. Reading from the Journal of the Punisher, the fighting in the East has gotten worse, or at least in the direction that he has decided is east in this place. 2 entire settlements had been wiped out, and he has been saving orphans. Weird World has been waging a war. He stays clear of all this warring going on. He is making his own path. because Frank Castle is not here to war. His war has come to an end. Frank Castle is here trying to save children in this land that is filled with the dead, with the burning bodies, with the scars of war. Frank Castle searches for redemption. And that will be the end of this issue. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I think this is hands down some of the best stuff that I have read in quite a while. And I know there are many of you that are out there gonna disagree with me. I am perfectly okay with that. You don't have to like the Punisher, though I feel like a lot of people just didn't give this series even a small opportunity to show what it truly could be. Now, this ending you can take a couple of different ways. The way that I see this ending is that he finally came to the realization that he was using his wife and children as an excuse to go on this murdering rampage. Because the truth is, he has been a killer long before that day. When he was a boy on a rooftop, when he was a man in a war zone, Frank Castle was broken long before his family, but he used them. He propped them up, put them on a pedestal, said that this is why I wage my war, trying to give it some kind of justification. But with Maria being alive, regardless if she hates him or not, this was his goal. Even if she doesn't believe him, he has waged this war so that she could live again. Because he knows, he feels responsible for her death. And now she finally has a second opportunity, another chance to live life, to be whoever she chose to be. A life that doesn't include Frank Castle. And so for his penance, he prayed to the Fist of the Beast, giving him just enough power so he could land himself in Weird World, where he has the opportunity to do something good, to do something noble, to not be the king of killers, but the savior of orphans. But that doesn't mean that the Fist of the Beast is gone. That doesn't mean that the Beast isn't going to try to get control of him. And while this left the story wide open for so much more to come, whether it be Frank Castle having a kid on the way, completely unaware of this, or being the time in Weird World, the story of Frank Castle will continue. So let me know your thoughts, let me know your theories. If you would like to get completely caught up on everything that happened with this series, be sure to check out the link in my description as well as the top of this video. It will get you completely caught up on everything going on with Frank Castle. If you would like to support the channel, you can always do so by joining the channel membership, much like Patreon having multiple different tiers, from $1 to $50, from loyalty badges to comics every single month. Not only are you helping out the channel tremendously, you are getting tons of perks in the process. Now, if you are unable to do that, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, like this video, hit that notification bell, and with that being said, until the next breakdown.